When resentment builds and it stacks, that is where we start to break down the quality of a relationship. And it can so easily happen, but it can also so easily be avoided.
I very much believe that your external reality is a mirror for you. So where you're getting triggered, it's a sign that there's something there. Start to ask the question why, instead of pointing the finger and blaming your partner and saying, my partner needs to change so I can feel better.
Welcome to the InPowered Life podcast,
a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Anniston, and this is InPowered Life.
Welcome to the InPowered Life podcast. My name is Rudi Riekstins. I'm joined by my beautiful wife, Anniston Riekstins. And today's conversation is really about how our relationship has managed to maintain at an incredibly high level. It's one of the things that I've spoken about the most on how I am so proud of how we are as a couple and how we show up. But sometimes that gives the illusion that everything is always perfect. And so today what we would like to do is pull back the curtain a little bit, lift the hood, show you a little bit inside what does it look like on any given day, in the hopes that it supports you, because we are fans of always teaching what it is that we are learning in the process of learning it. And we had an interesting experience just last week. And so we would love to take you back to what was a conversation that we had last week. And in having that conversation, we just thought, wow, what would it have looked like if we had done this a few days earlier, or if other people were able to bring this into their lives or into their marriages? Before Anniston sets the stage for what the week leading up to this conversation was all about, I just want to preface for a moment that the majority of people that are in a relationship, whether that is a marriage, whether it's a partnership, or whether you're in business, this bleeds into friendships, children, is that there's so often misunderstandings and miscommunications that create resentment. And when resentment builds and it stacks, that is where we start to break down the quality of a relationship. And it can so easily happen, but it can also so easily be avoided.
Yeah, to Rudi's point, before I share the story, there are no perfect relationships. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from my friends or family or clients or people we've just met, like, oh my gosh, you and Rudi have the most perfect relationship. Well, first of all, no, we don't. There are no perfect relationships, just there are no perfect people. I believe what gives it that illusion is because we do have such a strong friendship. We have such a strong trust in each other and a romance, but all of that is intentional. That didn't come by accident. And I think what sets apart the amazing relationship that everyone aspires to, like couple goals, and those that don't, is a couple's ability to deal with the issues as they come up. And that's something that Rudi and I have been really intentional about and perfected in our own relationship. But it doesn't mean that we don't still go through it. And I think the difference is it's how long do we let it impact us? How long do we let it sit before we address it? And we have every year, I feel like we shorten that gap, which is why I feel like every year our marriage gets stronger and stronger. So to set the stage for the story, Rudi and I were traveling, both of us traveling quite a bit in October. There were weeks, I would say it was about like a 3-week stretch there where I think I was home 2 days of that. You were home a few more than me. And then the last 10 of that traveling time, we were together actually hosting or co-hosting an event and with my company puts on an event, and it was incredible, but it was exhausting. And when we got home from that, we were both just completely energetically depleted, not just tired. There's tired and then there is depleted. And you know what that feels like when it's like even the smallest task can feel monumental and no amount of sleep is enough. It just takes time to rejuvenate and to refuel after giving so much energy for so long. And so I can speak for myself, and that when I am like that, I tend to go into my little shell. I want you to imagine a tortoise, and the head goes in, and I refuel by going within and being quiet. And so normally, for anyone who knows me, I am outgoing. I'm the most introverted extrovert you'll ever meet in terms of, I'm very conversational. I'm bubbly and I'm affectionate, especially with Rudi. And I will touch him and I will look him in the eye and smile at him and interact with him. And yet when I am really, really tired, that does not happen. In fact, all of that stops and I don't make eye contact. I am short. It appears from someone looking in, it would appear that I'm angry probably, or that I'm pissed off at something, or, it would be very easy to create a story around that. Yep. Rudi knows me. We've been married for a long time. However, it doesn't mean that he's a mind reader. And so as the days progressed after we got home, I just couldn't bounce back and I couldn't snap out of it. I started to notice that he was really short with me. And at first I thought, oh, he's just tired like I am. He's probably in a bad mood. I'm just going to give him some space. So then I give him more space and I'm even less available to him. And then it continues. And then I start to get a little pissed off because I'm like, seriously, what did I do? Why is he being so mean to me? Why is he being so short with me? And so I start creating the story that, and feeling almost in my head, because, you start pulling from past experiences and feeling almost resentful. Like I'm exhausted. I mean, I came home, I started my period. It got even worse, right? I was building the story in my head, justifying why it's okay for me to be tired, but that he can't be resentful towards me, towards that. Because again, I'm making assumptions of why he's behaving the way that he is. And eventually, 5 days later, we are sitting in the hot tub. It's the end of the day, Friday. And I can't remember if I brought it up or you did.
You came and you sat next to me and you gave me that cute little loving smile that you give me almost always. And I said, welcome back.
And then I got angry because that's what you do, right? I'm like, seriously? I was like immediately triggered by the fact that he said, welcome back, because I was like, that is just so unfair. That was my story. So now why don't you tell them your side of the story and then we'll tell them how we resolved it.
Before I share my story, I want to just put some ground, lay some more ground foundations here. So when Anniston says that, she's pissed off, she's not walking around the house throwing things around. And when I'm being short or rude, I'm not actually being rude to her. I'm just not being me, in the sense that normally we are very affectionate. We're sweet. We're very thoughtful. And we think of what are the needs of the other individuals in our home. And it's when those things start to retract, then it's processed as they're being mean, or they're not doing this, or they're not doing that. And so there was never a mean word or a spiteful moment, but it's you can tell there's a shift. And so we came back from this event and I had what I lovingly refer to as a spiritual hangover. It's when you host an event and you pour your energy into the room, it's almost as if your physical body has been drained and or depleted, and you are now having to refuel the energetic flow into your body. And so I travel a lot, I speak a lot, and so this happens a lot. But this event was a 5-day event stretched over a 10-day period of travel for us, where we were preparing the room, then we were in the room, then we had to break down the room. So all of the energy of what we had done and what we had created was stretched over a longer period of time than my usual going in for 1 or 2 or 3 days. And when we came home, I 100% acknowledged we were both tired. I mean, we took a day off of work. We went and got pampered at a spa. We went to bed early every single night, earlier than our early, which is 9 o'clock. So we were in bed at 8, lights off by 8:30, 8:15 some nights. So we were doing things to refuel. But I started to notice as the week went on that Anniston was a little grumpy, a little short. And I started to internalize it as like, what? Like, I don't understand why you're being like this, but I never said anything. And we usually do, but I didn't because we've just come off this big week. And so I wanted to give her grace. But in giving her grace, I also started to feel frustrated and resentful that she was being very short and very rude. And so there was no hand holding or back scratching or loving flutters of the eyelashes as she looks at me, or no special thanks or even bless yous when I sneezed. It all just ended. And so I started to be frustrated that she was in this mode of having to rebuild, but everything else around her had to, at that point, stop. And when we were sitting in the hot tub, and she looked at me like she always does. And it was like in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, there's my wife. She's back. Like her coffers have refueled. And then she was like, well, that's not fair because you've been rude to me all week and I've been upset that you've been upset. And I was like, when was I ever upset? And that was where the conversation unfolded.
It's really interesting how, no matter what, the story will always begin. The narrative will always be written. And it doesn't matter how long you've been with someone and how well you know them, and you can justify it. Your old wounds are gonna come up. Like your story is gonna be written with the undertones of really what that wound is. And so as that Friday night, as we started really unpacking like what happened, and at this point, we didn't have any emotion around it. We were really almost like, we were curious about this process. We were almost like became the observers of like, interesting how that we allowed that to happen when usually, because we communicate so much, we don't sit on things very long. And we recognize that week we were completely out of our schedule and our structure of how we usually structure our week. Usually every evening we're sitting down in front of the fire in the hot tub, at least for 30 minutes, just communicating with each other. And that's when these kinds of things would come up, or he would say, hey babe, like, is everything okay? Or I would say, hey, my experience of you is that you're a little short. Did I do anything? Because that's the story I'm telling myself. But we didn't do any of that because we were completely out of our routine and we were tired and we had soccer games and life, like we had life going on. And so we allowed ourselves to suffer. And this is what's so interesting is, we did this for 5 days, but there are relationships that go on like this for years. I mean, years before, and then it just stacks. That resentment stacks. That story gets stronger. The evidence continues to come in of, like he said, she didn't even say, bless you when I sneezed. I guarantee you he was looking, right? He was looking for more evidence of how I was in my head and not being thoughtful and not being myself. And so he saw more evidence and that became his focus. And our focus had shifted so widely that week, like looking for the negative aspects in each other instead of looking for what we normally do, and how quickly that changed how we both felt. And we both felt so validated. Like I felt validated in my perspective. He felt validated in his. And it really wasn't until someone was brave enough to say, hey, wait a minute. Like, let's talk about this because this is my story. What's your story? This is my story. And then I'm like, that's so interesting because he was responding to me in that way and making him that way. And then he was responding based on my behavior. I mean, it was just kind of a big cluster, of events and experiences that really could have lasted a lot longer, but arguably should have been a lot shorter. We should have shortened that suffering and we should have instead had the conversation.
I do an exercise with my clients that I may bring up many, many, many times over the course of this podcast, because I think that it is such an incredible tool to apply into life. And that is that if you were to walk into a kitchen and see a child standing behind a stove and the hand is over the stove and their hand is being burnt, let's say it's a gas stove, what would your reaction be? So you walk in, you see the child, 5 years old, hands burning over the stove. Immediate reaction would be pull the hand off the stove. And we can logically say that, yes, we should remove the hand from the stove because we want to stem the additional pain. We want to stop the person from having an additional injury. But we don't ever do that in our own lives. In our own lives, we keep ourselves in the pain. In the example, which Anniston and I had shared, both of us had created a story around the other person because we were both depleted, we were both tired, and our focus went from who we normally are to then looking for faults and or problems. And even though the week was mostly fine, it just wasn't at the level of what our relationship is always at. So it was a marked difference from who we usually are. And then when I saw her and she gave me that smile and she was flirty, and in that moment I was like, oh my gosh, there she is. The words, oh my God, welcome back, came out. And we were able to then take our hand off of that flame, because in that moment, she was able to say, oh, I've been a little off because you've been off. And then I'm like, I was never off. I was off because you were off. And then we spoke about it. And very objectively, we're looking at, well, when did you start and when did I start? And then we started to pick up the pieces. And for us, it was more of an investigation. As Anniston had shared, it became interesting to see the human behavior in the relationship that we have every day. And in that is a teaching, because what if I had just said something to her on Tuesday when I noticed it? What if she said something to me on Wednesday when she started? Because each of us was then looking through a lens of frustration, I'm not worthy, they're irritated, whatever the narrative is. And that was for 3 or 4 days, and that compounds. Now, we resolved that within 5 days. But what about if it's in your life? What if it's in your relationship? What if it's in your business partnership and you are holding on to these resentments? Most times when I go into a business and I'm supporting individuals inside of an organization where there is conflict, majority of the time, it's a misunderstanding. Somebody is so angry and frustrated with somebody else. There's an example of 2 people that are in business together. They work inside of an organization, and the 2 of them couldn't stand each other. In fact, they would go out of their way to create problems for the other person. And all of this was based on a misunderstanding of a scene that never actually happened. And they both had their own version of it. And when they were able to come together and forcibly look at the situation and say, speak your truth, now speak your truth, and they both realized, oh my gosh, there was no truth in any of what they had shared, they're now the best of friends. And they worked together for 5 years in that environment. What would it have looked like if they had lived for 5 years in that working environment, being the best friends that they are today? Because it's impacting their relationship at work, it's impacting their personal lives, it's impacting the revenue in the business. And there's a value in that. And that's the lesson from today, is lessening that pain, removing your hand from the flame. I want you to make a note of that story, and I want you to think about that every single time you have heightened emotion. If you are experiencing heightened emotion, you are inducing your body and your brain with a chemical, and it's your responsibility to say, is what I'm feeling even true? And if you don't know, where can you go to find out the facts? Where can you get the evidence? Because I don't like being frustrated or annoyed or irritated with Anniston for 3 extra days than I have to, if I could just go right to the source right away and say, hey, is everything okay? We are really good at saying, is everything all right? You seem a little off today. And then she'll say, no, I've got a big meeting. I'm in my head. And now I know it's not about me. It's not about the home. She's thinking about work. Or I could say, is there something I can help you with? Do you need a vantage point? And that's the benefit of being able to communicate and have this kind of dialogue.
And then I think the other side of it is recognizing that everything's happening for a reason. And even this situation in its imperfection, right? And being able to look back, hindsight's always 20/20. Oh, we should have had that conversation within 24 hours of feeling that emotion, but we didn't, right? So what did I gain from that? What did I learn? So I'm going to tell you what I learned from this experience, like what it mirrored back to me. And then I think you should share what you learned. So what I learned was that I still have a little work to do as it relates to my communicating my needs. And this has been a long thing for me, where when I was young, didn't know how to communicate what I needed. And so of course, then I start getting into relationships, especially romantic relationships. And I would, again, not communicate what I needed, or I have a story around, if I say, this is what I need, it might not be perceived well, or someone might get angry, or they might not understand. and then it's going to cause a confrontation, and I'd rather not do that. So what I could have done, what I should have done, and what I didn't, because I clearly have still some work to do here, is I should have just said every day, like, hey, I'm still at like a 4. Like out of my energy scale is at about a 4 right now. I know I might seem quiet, but I'm just in my head right now. And I feel really, really tired. And like, I almost don't even want to talk, but I love you and I'm here. Please tell me if you need anything. Like, just so that he wasn't creating a story or saying, I just need some space. I just need some quiet. I need some time on my own. Like, I get to say that and you get to say that. Right. And I think so many times then I get, my anger wasn't at him. My anger it was not at him. It was being reflected back at me and my own inability to be able to communicate my needs, and then getting frustrated when he's perceiving it wrong, right? Or he's not a mind reader, which he isn't. I mean, he is sometimes, but not all the time. So that's what I learned from that situation. What did you learn?
So I have, over the course of my dating relationships, had a series of, we all do, patterns. We have patterns through relationships. We learn tremendously through relationships. But I've had a pattern in my past, of being in a relationship with someone and everything is amazing and you could call the relationship in the hot category. And then all of a sudden it just goes cold, and for absolutely no reason. The light switch goes on and off. And I've never been able to understand that. I can actually think of a relationship, which is what came to me when we were sitting in the hot tub unpacking this, is I had been in a relationship with somebody. I'd known her for years, really liked her. And everything was in the very beginning stages of us now formalizing a relationship. And she'd gone away for a weekend. And on her trip going away for a weekend, she phoned me on a Friday at work and said, man, I know I'm 5 hours away on this weekend trip with my girlfriends, but I want you to come. She's like, I do not want to be here with my girlfriends. I want to be here with you. I want you to come down. And I could not get off work. I was working Friday and Saturday, and I was managing. So it wasn't like I could just pass this responsibility off to somebody else. And I said to her, man, I will move heaven and earth to do a trip with you, but it'll have to be next weekend or the weekend after. I cannot make it. I mean, it's Friday already. I cannot do that. And she returned on Monday, and that light switch was off. It just went cold. And something happened from that Friday. And it wasn't directly after that phone call, because she was still great all of Friday, all of Saturday, but then something happened. And, in my mind, I created narratives. Maybe she cheated on me. Maybe, she was frustrated. Maybe a friend said something. Maybe somebody spoke her out of it, but that light switch just turned off. And I've had a number of those moments where these relationships go hot and cold. And then I'm left to wonder, like, what? Are we still in this? Are we not in this? What's going on? And it triggers those feelings of not feeling like you're good enough or not feeling like you're worthy. Anniston has never, ever made me feel like I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. Not that I can logically, consciously process and say to you, yes, there was this day, definitively, she made me feel that way. And our relationship is, in my mind, perfect, because the perfect relationship is where you push each other to learn, to grow. You acknowledge each other as teachers. You welcome the teaching in the relationship, and you're best friends through the process, and you make each other the priorities. And that is what our relationship is. That's why I believe our relationship is as beautiful as it is. And it's not beautiful that I want other people outwardly to look at how great it is. I selfishly am just so in love with the relationship that we have. And it's everything that I wish for every single person on the planet to have, because I think we would have a very different world if we all had an environment with a built-in accountability partner within your relationship, which is what we have. But in that moment of that week, with Anniston just pulling back a little bit and withdrawing, it triggered unconsciously the emotions of, oh, she's hot, she's cold. And I was reacting and responding, not outwardly, not physically, not with words, internally, the chemical dump going into my body, the hand over the flame, experiencing the pain of all the times girls just turned off, and it was hot and cold and hot and cold. And so for those 3 or 4 days for me, I was questioning from when I started having that, like, what? Like, why is she all of a sudden gone dark? Why is she gone cold? Like, well, like, what's going on? And then in my mind, I'm creating this narrative and this story. And that again just proves that we just always are in a work in progress. Every single one of us are a work in progress. What I want to emphasize for everybody is we think that we need to find a partner who is going to be amazing, who's going to be supportive, who's always going to love us, who's never going to challenge us, and everything's going to be amazing. And I'm going to tell you now, that is the most boring relationship you could ever have. You want somebody in your life who is going to call you out. You want somebody in your life who's going to put you on a pedestal, and when you come off it, remind you to get back up. That is going to see you for who you are, that are your strengths, and also see your weaknesses and support you to work through them. Because that's the beauty of having a relationship like that. And Annis and I have curated a relationship where we can go to the other person and share vulnerably without there being risk of them, losing their temper or being frustrated or holding it against you, and being able to just say, hey, you did and or said something, and this is how it's made me feel. And here's where it shows up in my past. And I would love your support in when I am reacting to you this way. Notice I didn't ask her to change. When I am reacting to you this way, if you could just point it out to me so that I can clear that, because I would love to have a relationship that doesn't have that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I very much believe that your external reality is a mirror for you, right? So where you're getting triggered is just, it's a sign that so there's something there. Like, why? And so start to ask the question, why? Instead of pointing the finger and blaming your partner and saying, my partner needs to change so I can feel better. Well, guess what? Even if your partner did change, somebody else or some other situation is going to come that's going to give you the opportunity for you to change. Because until you change, nothing else will. And I think because we know this and we're conscious of it, doesn't mean that we don't go unconscious and get into the emotion and get triggered. It's just we're able to help remind each other. It's like we don't jump in the hole with the other person. We typically pull the other person out. It's very rare that both of us at the same time are exhausted and tired and not at our best, which is why I think we had that experience that we did. But, we've had people say to us, oh my gosh, you guys should host a couples retreat, and you could teach couples how to, it's usually women who are saying, hey, can I bring my husband? And then you can help him become better. And we're like, sure, yeah, we would love to host a couples retreat, but it's basically going to be the same retreat we host anywhere else, because at the end of the day, it's all about the individual. It's all about the individual. If you're sitting there listening to this thinking, oh man, I wish my husband could listen to this right now. He really needs to hear this. Or if you're listening to this thinking, my wife should definitely listen to this so she can take accountability for her behavior. I'm telling you right now, you're missing the point. It's a mirror, and you get to be the change, and you get to be the one that gets to start asking the question and observing. So our recommendation would be, when you find yourself in a situation like this and you are creating a story, you're getting upset, you're becoming resentful, whether it be at a partner or a coworker, at a child. I mean, it could be any relationship of yours. Start by asking yourself some questions, like, where else have I felt this before? Why am I getting triggered over this behavior? There's plenty of other behavior that he does that does not trigger me. So what is it about this specific behavior that is really getting me riled up? And then where else in my life have I experienced it? And that is the gold, because you don't have to solve it. You don't have to go back to the experience. It's just that awareness that starts to dissolve it so that it neutralize it. So that it doesn't have to be a pattern that follows you around the rest of your life and continues to come up, and you feel like you're banging your head against a wall. So we hope that this has served you. We hope that those of you that can relate to our story, that this might give you something to think about, a different way of approaching these situations when they happen, but more than anything, to see them for the opportunity that they are, because they're happening for a reason. That happened for Rudi and I for a reason. And then you're able to give it meaning and a purpose. I mean, we're sitting here on a podcast sharing the story with the world. That experience has a purpose. And it wasn't just for us. It was so that we could turn around and teach it. And your challenges and opportunities are opportunities in disguise for you. These are your lessons and what you're meant to focus on in the moment. So be present for it. Don't resist it. and really start asking the right questions, and your entire relationship will change. Not only your relationship with other people, but more importantly, your relationship with yourself.
Your relationship with yourself. And with that, we love you. We'll catch you guys on the next episode of the InPowered Life podcast. Please rate and review this podcast as it helps spread our message out in the world. And we always love to ask that if you enjoyed the episode, if you can think of somebody who would resonate with this message, please feel free to share it with them. We would appreciate it, and we appreciate you. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.